Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
I've never told anyone this story before, mostly because it sounds insane even to me when I recount it in my head. It happened a little while ago, back when I was in that aimless post-college phase, bouncing between dead-end jobs and trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with my life. I was living in a small apartment in a rundown part of town, scraping by and honestly pretty lonely. That's probably why I ignored all the blaring warning signals and ended up in the situation I did. It all started with a dating app, not Tinder or something a little more obscure that a friend recommended. It was supposed to be for people looking for something deeper than just hookups. Looking back, that should have been my first clue that something was off. I matched with a guy named Silas. His profile was different. He had no photos, just a series of abstract paintings that he claimed were his own. His bio was even stranger, filled with philosophical ramblings about the nature of time and reality. But he seemed intelligent, and his messages were surprisingly engaging. He didn't ask the usual superficial questions. Instead, he wanted to talk about my dreams, my fears, what I thought happened after death. It was intense, but I was drawn to it. After a week or so of messaging, he suggested we meet. He was insistent on picking the place, a small independent bookstore on the outskirts of town that I'd never heard of. He said it was his favorite place in the world, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Yeah, I know, red flags galore, but I was intrigued and honestly bored enough to ignore them. The bookstore was exactly as he described, small, cluttered, and filled with an overwhelming smell of old paper and dust. It was dimly lit, and the shelves were packed with books I'd never seen before, their titles written in languages I didn't recognize. Silas was already there when I arrived, standing in the corner near a shelf filled with leather-bound tomes. He was tall and thin, with long, dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He wore a long black coat that seemed out of place in the small, stuffy store. He looked like he'd stepped out of a Gothic novel. He greeted me with a warm smile, but there was something unsettling about his eyes, the kind of intensity that made me uncomfortable. We started talking, and he was just as articulate and engaging in person as he was online. He spoke about books, philosophy, and the hidden mysteries of the universe. He seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. For a while, I almost forgot about the strange vibe I was getting. Then he started talking about the bookstore itself. He said it was more than just a place to buy books. It was a gateway, a nexus point where different realities intersected. He claimed that the owner, an old woman named Ms. Eldridge, was a kind of guardian, protecting the world from forces beyond our comprehension. I laughed it off, assuming he was being theatrical, but he insisted he was serious. He led me to Ms. Eldridge, who was sitting behind the counter reading a book. She was ancient, her face wrinkled and pale, her eyes clouded with age. Silas introduced me, and Ms. Eldridge gave me a knowing look, a look that made me feel like she could see right through me. Silas then suggested we explore the back of the store, where he said the real treasures were hidden. I hesitated, but he was persuasive, and Ms. Eldridge nodded, as if giving us her blessing. We walked through a narrow passageway lined with shelves that seemed to stretch on forever. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. I felt a growing sense of unease. Finally, we reached a small circular room. In the center, there was a single pedestal, and on the pedestal, there was a book. It was bound in human skin, its pages filled with strange symbols and drawings. The air in the room crackled with energy. Silas picked up the book and opened it, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He started reading aloud, his voice taking on a strange, hypnotic quality. The words were in a language I didn't understand, but they resonated deep within my soul. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, a primal fear that I couldn't explain. As he read, the room began to shake. The shadows danced and twisted, and the air grew thick with a strange, metallic smell. I tried to tell Silas to stop, but he didn't hear me. He was completely absorbed in the book, his eyes glazed over, his body trembling. Suddenly, the book burst into flames. Silas screamed, dropping it to the floor. The fire spread rapidly, engulfing the room in a blaze of heat and light. I grabbed Silas's hand and dragged him out of the room, back through the passageway. When we reached the front of the store, Miss Eldridge was standing behind the counter, watching us with a calm, almost serene expression. She didn't seem surprised or concerned by the fire. She simply nodded and said it had to be done. We ran out of the bookstore, gasping for air. As we stood on the sidewalk watching the building burn, Silas turned to me, his eyes filled with terror. "What have I done?" he whispered. "What have I unleashed?" I didn't know what to say. I was too shocked and scared to think straight. I just wanted to get away from him, away from the bookstore, away from everything that had just happened. I told him I had to go and ran back to my apartment. The next day, I went back to the bookstore, but it was gone. In its place, it was just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. There was no sign that the building had ever been there. I asked around, but no one seemed to remember the bookstore or Ms. Eldridge or Silas. It was like they had never existed. I never saw Silas again. I tried to find him online, but all his social media profiles were gone. It was like he had vanished from the face of the earth. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night. Was it a hallucination? A shared delusion? Or did I really stumble into some kind of hidden reality, a world of ancient magic and unspeakable horrors? I'll probably never know. But one thing I do know is that I'll never trust a dating app again. And I'll definitely never go into another bookstore without checking the fire exits first. And if someone's profile has no pictures, don't risk it. This happened to me a few months ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. I've been single for a while, and my friends kept pushing me to get back out there, so I caved and downloaded a dating app. I wasn't expecting much, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try. I matched with a guy named Alex, and he seemed pretty normal at first. We texted back and forth for a few days, talking about our jobs, hobbies, and favorite movies. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. The coffee date went well, or so I thought. He was just as charming in person as he was over text, and we had a lot in common. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I was happy too, so I said yes. Our second date was a dinner at a nice Italian restaurant. Again, everything seemed perfect. He was attentive, complimentary, and the conversation flowed easily. He even paid for the entire meal, which was a nice gesture. As the night went on, though, I started noticing some subtle things that made me uneasy. He kept steering the conversation towards my personal life, asking probing questions about my family, my past relationships, and where I lived. He asked about my security system at home and whether I lived alone. At the time, I brushed it off as him just being curious, but looking back, it was definitely a red flag. He kept making comments about how much he liked that I was independent, how it was hot when a woman had their own place, especially if it was secluded. I also noticed that he kept glancing around the restaurant, almost as if he were watching someone or expecting something to happen. Despite these weird vibes, I still agreed to a third date. I know I should have listened to my gut, but I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Our third date was where things went completely off the rails. He suggested we go for a hike in a nearby state park. I love hiking, so I was excited about the idea. He picked me up at my apartment, and we drove to the park. The drive was normal, and we talked about the scenery and the different hiking trails. When we got to the park, he chose a trail that was less traveled. He said he liked the peace and quiet, but I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy as we walked further into the woods. The trail went on and on into the woods, and I asked how far we were going. He simply said, "The end." This is a true story that still haunts me, not because of what happened asterisk to asterisk me, but because of what I almost let happen asterisk because asterisk of me. It's a story about a dating app encounter gone horribly wrong, a situation where I was almost complicit in something truly sinister, and the guilt of that near miss is something I carry with me every day. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of a long-term relationship, and feeling like I needed to experience something. I downloaded this niche dating app, one that catered to people with, let's just say, asterisk alternative asterisk interests. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it wasn't your average Tinder or Bumble. It was a place where people explored the darker edges of desire, and honestly, at the time, that appealed to my slightly reckless and newly single self. I matched with a guy who called himself Javid. His profile was intriguing. Lots of cryptic photos, poetry about shadows and the moon, and a bio that hinted at a fascination with the occult. He seemed intelligent and a little bit dangerous, a combination that, in my naivete, I found exciting. We started chatting, and Jade was surprisingly articulate and engaging. He wasn't sleazy or pushy, which was a welcome change from some of the other interactions I'd had on the app. He spoke about art, philosophy, and history, always with a dark, romantic undertone. He talked about finding beauty in the macabre, about the allure of the forbidden. He definitely had a way with words. After a week or so online chatting, he suggested we meet in person. He proposed a picnic in a secluded park outside of town. I hesitated. The park was known for being a bit desolate, especially after dark, but Jade was persuasive. He painted a picture of a moonlit rendezvous, a chance to connect on a deeper level, away from the noise and distractions of the city. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the picnic, I drove up to the park. It was even more isolated than I remembered, the trees looming tall and menacing in the darkness. I almost turned back, but then I saw Javid standing by a picnic table, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. He looked different in person, more intense, more imposing. He had set up a beautiful spread. A checkered blanket, candles, wine, and an array of gourmet cheeses and fruits. It was clear he had put a lot of effort into it, which both flattered and unsettled me. We sat down and started talking, and the conversation flowed easily, just like I had online. He was charming, witty, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. As the evening progressed, the conversation took a darker turn. He started talking about rituals, about the power of belief, and about the existence of hidden energies that connected all things. He wasn't preachy or condescending, but rather spoke with a quiet conviction that was both captivating and unnerving. Then he pulled out a small, ornate box. Inside, there was a collection of strange objects: a dried flower, a piece of bone, a lock of hair, and a small, tarnished silver knife. He explained that these were tools for a personal ritual, something he wanted to share with me. He said it was a way to open ourselves to the universe and connect on a spiritual level. My alarm bells were going off like crazy. This was way beyond my comfort zone. I started to feel a knot of panic tighten in my stomach. I told him I wasn't really into that kind of thing and tried to change the subject. But Jade was insistent. He said it was a unique opportunity, a chance to experience something truly profound. He gently took my hand and started to explain the steps of the ritual. He wanted me to prick my finger with the silver knife and let a drop of blood fall onto the dried flower. He said it was a symbolic offering, a way to show our commitment to the process. I recoiled. This was insane. I tried to pull my hand away, but Javid held on tight. His grip was surprisingly strong. That's when I noticed another figure step out from behind the trees. It was another man, tall and shadowy, his face obscured by the darkness. He was carrying something in his hands, something long and thin wrapped in cloth. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not just some harmless ritual. This was something much darker, much more dangerous. I finally managed to yank my hand away from Javed. I jumped to my feet, knocking over the picnic basket in the process. "I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't feel well." This is a true story that still haunts me, not because of what happened to me, but because of what I almost let happen because of me. It's a story about a dating app encounter gone horribly wrong. A situation where I was almost complicit in something truly sinister, and the guilt of that near miss is something I carry with me every day. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of a long-term relationship, and feeling like I needed to experience something. I downloaded this niche dating app, one that catered to people with, let's just say, alternative interests. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it wasn't your average Tinder or Bumble. It was a place where people explored the darker edges of desire, and honestly, at the time, that appealed to my slightly reckless and newly single self. I matched with a guy who called himself Javed. His profile was intriguing. Lots of cryptic photos, poetry about shadows and the moon, and a bio that hinted at a fascination with the occult. He seemed intelligent and a little bit dangerous, a combination that in my naivete I found exciting. We started chatting, and Javed was surprisingly articulate and engaging. He wasn't sleazy or pushy, which was a welcome change from some of the other interactions I'd had on the app. He spoke about art, philosophy, and history, always with a dark, romantic undertone. He talked about finding beauty in the macabre, about the allure of the forbidden. He definitely had a way with words. After a week or so of online chatting, he suggested we meet in person. He proposed a picnic in a secluded park outside of town. I hesitated. The park was known for being a bit desolate, especially after dark, but Jade was persuasive. He painted a picture of a moonlit rendezvous, a chance to connect on a deeper level away from the noise and distractions of the city. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night of the picnic, I drove out to the park. It was even more isolated than I remembered, the trees looming tall and menacing in the darkness. I almost turned back, but then I saw Javid standing by a picnic table, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. He looked different in person, more intense, more imposing. He had set up a beautiful spread, a checkered blanket, candles, wine, and an array of gourmet cheeses and fruits. It was clear he had put a lot of effort into it, which both flattered and unsettled me. We sat down and started talking, and the conversation flowed easily, just like it had online. He was charming, witty, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. As the evening progressed, the conversation took a darker turn. He started talking about rituals, about the power of belief, and about the existence of hidden energies that connected all things. He wasn't preachy or condescending, but rather spoke with a quiet conviction that was both captivating and unnerving. Then he pulled out a small, ornate box. Inside, there was a collection of strange objects: a dried flower, a piece of bone, a lock of hair, and a small, tarnished silver knife. He explained that these were tools for a personal ritual, something he wanted to share with me. He said it was a way to open ourselves to the universe and connect on a spiritual level. My alarm bells were going off like crazy. This was way beyond my comfort zone. I started to feel a knot of panic tighten in my stomach. I told him I wasn't really into that kind of thing and tried to change the subject. But Jade was insistent. He said it was a unique opportunity, a chance to experience something truly profound. He gently took my hand and started to explain the steps of the ritual. He wanted me to prick my finger with the silver knife and let a drop of blood fall onto the dried flower. He said it was a symbolic offering, a way to show our commitment to the process. I recoiled. This was insane. I tried to pull my hand away, but Javid held on tight. His grip was surprisingly strong. That's when I noticed another figure step out from behind the trees. It was another man, tall and shadowy, his face obscured by the darkness. He was carrying something in his hands, something long and thin wrapped in cloth. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not just some harmless ritual. This was something much darker, much more dangerous. I finally managed to yank my hand away from Javed. I jumped to my feet, knocking over the picnic basket in the process. "I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't feel well." Javed's expression changed. The charming facade vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "Don't be foolish," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You've come this far. You can't back out now." I didn't wait to hear another word. I turned and ran as fast as I could back towards my car. I could hear Javed and the other man shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked the car, and jumped inside. I locked the doors and started the engine, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Javed and the other man were standing by the picnic table, watching me. The other man had unwrapped the object he was carrying. It was a knife, a large hunting knife glinting in the moonlight. I drove straight to the police station and reported everything that had happened. The police took my statement, but they were skeptical. They searched the park, but they found nothing. No picnic set, no strange objects, no sign of Javed with the other man. They said it was probably just a misunderstanding, a harmless encounter that I had blown out of proportion. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. And I knew that I had narrowly escaped something truly horrific. I deleted the dating app and went into hiding for a while, terrified that Javed would find me. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and tried to erase all traces of my existence. To this day, I don't know what Javed and the other man were planning to do that night. I don't know if they had done this before, or if they had other victims. But I do know that I was almost one of them, and that the thought of what almost happened and the guilt of my own recklessness will haunt me forever. I will never be the same. I should have trusted my instincts when he showed up 20 minutes late, not with a sheepish apology, but with a rambling story about a flat tire and a heroic rescue involving a stray cat and a particularly stubborn lug nut. Now, I'm usually a sucker for a good animal rescue story, but something about his delivery felt off. Too theatrical, maybe. Like he was trying too hard to be charming. But I brushed to the side, figuring I was just being judgmental. After all, everyone gets nervous on a first date, right? We'd matched on Hinge, and his profile seemed pretty normal. Decent photos, a witty bio, and a shared love of hiking. We exchanged a few messages, and the conversation flowed easily enough. He suggested meeting for coffee at a local cafe, which seemed like a safe, low-pressure option. That was red flag number one. If this dude wanted to get to know me, he would have planned something more personal. But I ignored it. The coffee date itself was weird. He dominated the conversation, talking mostly about himself and his accomplishments. He was a software engineer, apparently a genius in his field, and he made sure I knew it. He peppered his stories with jargon I didn't understand and seemed annoyed when I asked him to explain things. But still, I ignored the clear signs. He also had this habit of staring, like really staring. Not in a flirty, admiring way, but in a way that made me feel like I was a bug under a microscope. His eyes would fixate on my face, and he wouldn't blink for what felt like an uncomfortably long time. It was unnerving, to say the least. Despite all of these red flags, I agreed to a second date. I know, I can practically hear you screaming at me through the screen. But he was persistent, and I was still holding onto the hope that maybe I was misreading him, that maybe he was just socially awkward or nervous. We planned to go for a hike on a trail near my house. I felt safe on this trail. It was a popular place with other hikers. I still wish I would have trusted my gut. The hike started out okay. The weather was beautiful, the trail was relatively empty, and he seemed a little more relaxed than he had been on the coffee date. We even had a few moments of genuine conversation, talking about our favorite books and movies. It was like a switch flipped, and suddenly, he wasn't the arrogant, staring weirdo from our first date. But then, about an hour into the hike, he started acting strange again. He kept veering off the trail into the denser parts of the woods. I asked him where he was going, and he just shrugged and said he wanted to explore. I told him I'd rather stick to the trail, but he insisted, practically pulling me along with him. As we got further and further from the marked path, the woods grew darker and more ominous. The trees were taller, the undergrowth thicker, and the air felt heavy and still. I started to feel uneasy again, the same creeping sense of dread I experienced on our first date. I told him I wanted to turn back, that I wasn't comfortable being so far off the trail. He stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Don't be such a scaredy cat," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "We're just having a little fun." I stood my ground, refusing to move. "I'm serious," I said. "I want to go back." He sighed dramatically and rolled his eyes. "Fine," he said, "but you're missing out." As we turned to head back towards the trail, I noticed something glinting in his hand. It was a knife, a small folding knife, but a knife nonetheless. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Where did that knife come from? Why did he have it? Without saying a word, I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could back the way we had come, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush, trying to catch up. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I ran till I burst out of the woods and back onto the main trail, where I collapsed, gasping for air. I looked around wildly, expecting to see him emerge from the trees at any moment, but he didn't. After a few minutes, I managed to stand up and stumble back to my car, my legs shaking uncontrollably. I drove straight to the police station and reported the incident. They took my statement and promised to investigate. They searched the woods, but they never found him. I never saw him again, but I'll never forget that hike. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Always trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And never, ever go on a second date with a guy who stares too much and carries a knife. I still get chills thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't run. I shudder to think of the countless dating app profiles I mindlessly swiped through. I was almost a statistic. I hope this story is enough to help at least one woman get away from a potential statistic. Trust your instincts because those red flags are not coincidences. The scariest part is that this really happened. I always thought those dating app horror stories were exaggerated, just people blowing things out of proportion for a good story. I mean, sure, you meet some weirdos online, but I never thought I'd end up in a situation that still makes me wake up in a cold sweat. This was about 2 years ago when I was living in a small town, bored and restless. I swiped right on this guy, Mark, who seemed normal enough. His profile was pretty generic: hiking pictures, a blurry photo with some friends, a bio that said he was just looking for someone to explore with. We matched and started chatting. He seemed nice, maybe a little shy, but overall harmless. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, the usual first date stuff. After a week or so, we decided to meet up for coffee. The coffee date was fine. He was a little awkward, didn't make a lot of eye contact, but he was polite and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for a couple of hours, and he asked if I wanted to go for a walk in the park. I figured why not? It was a beautiful day, and the park was right across the street. The walk was pleasant enough. We talked about the town, the upcoming local events, nothing too deep. As we walked, he mentioned that he lived on a farm just outside of town. He said he helped his dad with the animals and the crops. I grew up in the suburbs, so farm life was kind of intriguing to me. He said maybe sometime I could come out and see the place. I brushed it off, not really thinking anything of it. We finished the walk, said goodbye, and I went home. I didn't feel a spark or anything, but he seemed like a decent guy, so I figured I'd give it another shot. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. We went to a movie, had dinner at a local diner, and even went bowling. He was still a little awkward, but he seemed to be opening up more. Then he asked me to come out to his farm. I hesitated. Something about it felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had this nagging feeling that I shouldn't go. But he was so insistent that I didn't want to be rude. Plus, I was curious. I'd never been to a real farm before, so I said yes. He picked me up on a Saturday morning in his old beat-up truck. The drive out to the farm was longer than I expected. We drove down winding country roads, past fields and forests. The landscape got more and more isolated. I started to feel a little uneasy. When we finally arrived, the farm was different than I imagined. It wasn't the idyllic, picturesque farm you see in movies. It was run down and overgrown. The house was old and dilapidated, the barn was falling apart, and the fields were filled with weeds. There was a strange, unsettling silence about the place. No animals, no people, just emptiness. Mark's dad wasn't around. He said he had gone out to pick up some supplies. I was instantly on edge since I was expecting to meet his dad. He gave me a tour of the farm, pointing out the various buildings and explaining what they used to be for. He seemed proud of the place, even though it was in such disrepair. As we walked, I noticed a strange smell in the air. It was hard to describe, but it was like a mix of dirt, decay, and something else, something metallic. It made my stomach churn. He led me to the barn, which was even more dilapidated than it looked from the outside. The doors were hanging off their hinges, and the roof was partially collapsed. He pushed the doors open and invited me inside. The inside of the barn was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung everywhere, and the air was thick with the same strange smell. I could barely see anything, but as my eyes adjusted, I started to make out shapes in the shadows. Old farm equipment, stacks of hay bales, and something else. In the corner of the barn, there was a large covered object. It was draped with a heavy tarp, and I couldn't tell what it was. I asked Mark what it was, and he just smiled. "Oh, that's just something I'm working on," he said. His voice was flat and emotionless. He started walking towards the object, and I felt a surge of panic. I don't know why, but I knew I had to get out of there. I told him I wasn't feeling well and that I needed to go home. He didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards the covered object. I turned and ran. I ran out of the barn, across the yard, and towards the road. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could. I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't stop. I ran until I reached the main road, where I flagged down a passing car. I told the driver what happened, and they drove me back to town. I went straight to the police station and filed a report. I told them everything about the farm, the smell, the covered object. They seemed skeptical, but they agreed to check it out. The police went out to the farm, but they didn't find anything. Mark was gone, and so was his dad. The house was empty, and the farm was deserted. The police said it looked like they had packed up and left in a hurry. They couldn't find any evidence of a crime. I never saw Mark again. The police never found him or his dad. I don't know what was under that tarp, and I don't want to know. I just know that I got out of there just in time. I still think about that farm. I still have nightmares about the smell and the shadows in the barn. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that seem the most normal. And the scariest part is that this really happened. I thought I was being paranoid until I found the collection. Up until that point, it was just a series of unsettling coincidences, little things that made me question my sanity. Now looking back, I realized that paranoia was my brain trying to protect me, screaming warnings I initially ignored. It all started with David. I met him at a bookstore. He was browsing the true crime section, and I was there to buy a new journal. We struck up a conversation about our favorite authors, and I was immediately drawn to his intense gaze and quiet intelligence. He was a writer, he said, working on a novel. I was a graphic designer, and we bonded over our shared love of art and storytelling. Our first few dates were like something out of a movie. We went to art galleries, independent film screenings, and cozy cafes. He was attentive, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He remembered every detail I told him, from my childhood pet to my favorite flower. It was intoxicating. I hadn't felt this way about someone in a long time, and I let myself fall hard and fast. But then the little things started happening. The first was the phone calls. I'd get calls from numbers I didn't recognize, usually late at night. When I answered, there was only silence on the other end. David would brush it off, saying it was probably just a wrong number or a telemarketer. But it happened so frequently that it started to feel deliberate. Then there was the feeling of being watched. I'd catch glimpses of someone in the periphery, a figure standing across the street or a car parked down the block. When I looked closer, they were always gone. Again, David would reassure me, telling me I was probably just stressed or tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. One evening, I was at his apartment waiting for him to finish up a work call. I was browsing his bookshelf when I noticed something odd. Tucked away on the top shelf, hidden behind his stack of books, was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it down. The journal was filled with meticulous handwriting, detailing the lives of several women. Each entry was a profile describing their appearance, habits, and routines. There were details about their jobs, their friends, their favorite places to go. It was like someone had been studying them, watching their every move. I felt a chill run down my spine as I flipped through the pages. The entries were dated, spanning several years, and then I saw a name I recognized, mine. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the entry about me. It was disturbingly accurate, describing my daily routine, my likes and dislikes, even the color of my toothbrush. It was clear that David had been watching me, stalking me. I slammed the journal shut and put it back on the shelf, trying to appear calm when David walked back into the room. I made an excuse about needing to leave early and rushed out his apartment, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. It was just a journal after all, and David was so charming, so believable. I was afraid they wouldn't take me seriously. So I did what any rational person would do. I started investigating him myself. I spent hours online, digging into his past. I learned that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been fired from several jobs for inappropriate behavior towards female colleagues. And there were rumors of a restraining order filed against him by a former girlfriend. The more I learned, the more terrified I became. I realized that I had unknowingly invited a dangerous person into my life. I had to get out, but I had to do it quickly. I started taking precautions. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray. I avoided going out alone and always made sure someone knew where I was. But David was persistent. He kept calling and texting, begging me to talk to him, telling me he was sorry. I ignored him, but I knew he wouldn't give up easily. One night, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I cautiously stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment was dark and silent. I slowly made my way through the living room, my hand gripping the pepper spray in my pocket, and then I saw him. David was standing in the corner, shrouded in shadow. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with those intense, unsettling eyes. I raised the pepper spray and aimed it at his face. "Stay away from me," I screamed, my voice trembling. He didn't move. He just stood there watching me, and then he smiled. That's when I saw the collection. On the table in front of him were photographs, dozens of them. They were pictures of me, taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me walking to work, pictures of me at the grocery store, pictures of me in my apartment. He had been watching me for weeks, documenting my every move. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with the pictures of me were other photos of other women. Women who looked eerily similar to me. Women who had gone missing. I realized then that David wasn't just a stalker. He was something far more sinister. He was a predator, and I was his next target. I sprayed the pepper spray in his face and ran out of the apartment, screaming for help. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station. David was eventually arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, and several other crimes. They found a hidden room in his apartment filled with more photos, journals, and other evidence of his obsession. I testified against him in court, and he was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. But even now, years later, I still have nightmares about him. I still look over my shoulder, wondering if he's watching me. I thought I was being paranoid until I found the collection. Now I know that sometimes paranoia is just a survival instinct, and sometimes the monsters are real. I've never told anyone this story before, partly because it sounds completely insane, and partly because I'm still not sure exactly what happened. It's been years, but the memory still sticks with me, a cold knot in my stomach. I was in my early 20s, living in a small town, and bored out of my mind. Dating options were limited to say the least, so naturally I turned to online dating. This was back when it was still kind of a taboo thing, not the norm like it is now. I used a fake name, a blurry photo, the whole 9 yards. I was just looking for something to do, some excitement, and boy, did I find it. I matched with a guy named Habib. His profile was pretty generic, like hiking movies, the usual. But his messages were different. He was intense, philosophical, almost poetic. He talked about fate, destiny, and how he felt like we were meant to meet. It was a little much, but also intriguing. I was young and impressionable, and I fell for it. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks, and he convinced me to meet him. He suggested a spot a little outside of town, a secluded hiking trail he knew. Red flag number one, I know, but I ignored it. I told myself I was being adventurous, breaking out of my shell. The day of the date, I was nervous but excited. I drove to the trailhead, and Habib was already there, waiting for me. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes and a strange intensity in his gaze. He was attractive, I guess, in a brooding, mysterious kind of way. We started hiking, and the conversation flowed easily at first. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. But as we got deeper into the woods, the atmosphere started to change. The trail became narrower, the trees grew denser, and the air grew colder. He started talking about his beliefs, which were unusual to say the least. He talked about ancient spirits, hidden energies, and how the world was on the verge of some kind of cosmic shift. He claimed he could feel these energies, that he was connected to something bigger than himself. I tried to laugh it off, but his eyes were so serious, so intense, that I started to feel uneasy. Then he stopped walking. He turned to me, his eyes wide, and said, "I brought you here for a reason." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He took a step closer to me. "I need your help," he said. "There's something I have to do, something only you can help me with." I tried to back away, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "This is our destiny." He started leading me off the trail into the thick underbrush. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You'll see," he said, a strange smile spreading across his face. He led me to a small clearing, hidden deep in the woods. In the center of the clearing was a large, flat rock, and on the rock, drawn in what looked like blood, was a strange symbol. My blood ran cold. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This is where the ritual will take place," he said. "What ritual?" I asked, my mind racing. "The ritual to awaken the ancient spirits," he said. "And you're going to help me." He started chanting in a language I didn't recognize. His voice grew louder and louder, and the air around us seemed to vibrate. I was terrified. I tried to run, but he grabbed me again, pulling me towards the rock. "No!" I screamed. "Let me go." He ignored me. He forced me onto the rock, positioning me so that I was lying on top of the symbol. I struggled against him, but he was too strong. "It's okay," he whispered in my ear. "This will all be over soon." He pulled a knife from his pocket, It was long and sharp, and the blade glinted in the dim light. I screamed again, louder this time. "Please don't do this," I begged. "This is for the greater good," he said, his eyes glazed over. He raised the knife above me, ready to strike. And then, everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, I was lying on the ground alone. Habib was gone. The knife was gone. The symbol was still on the rock, but the blood seemed to have faded. I stumbled to my feet and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home, locked myself in my apartment, and didn't leave for days. I went to the police, but they didn't believe me. They said there was no evidence of a crime, no blood, no knife, no Habib. They said I probably just imagined it all. But I know what happened. I know he was going to kill me. I never used online dating again. I moved to a different town, changed my name, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But I can't. The memory is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I still have nightmares about Habib, about the knife, about the ritual. I don't know who he was or what he wanted. I don't know if he's still out there looking for other victims. All I know is that I got lucky. I somehow managed to escape. But I'll never forget the terror of that day, the feeling of being helpless, of being at the mercy of a madman. And that's why I've never told this story before. Because sometimes the truth is too terrifying to share. Sometimes it's better to just keep it buried deep inside, where it can't hurt anyone else. This experience is something you don't want to experience. I'm lucky to be alive. I thought I was being paranoid until I found the hidden compartment in his closet. Let me rewind a bit. After a string of disastrous online dates and frustrating encounters at bars, I was starting to think I was destined to be single forever. Then I met Derek. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in me. We met at a local bookstore, how cute, right? Bonded over our shared love of classic literature, and ended up talking for hours. He asked for my number, and I, for once, didn't hesitate to give it to him. The first few dates were perfect. We went to art museums, tried new restaurants, and even went stargazing in the park. He was attentive, respectful, and always made me feel special. He seemed like the kind of guy I could actually build a future with. He even met my friends, and they all loved him. My best friend, Sarah, usually has a sixth sense about these things, and she gave Derek her seal of approval. "He's a keeper," she declared after our first double date. After about a month of dating, Derek invited me to his apartment. He lived in a newly renovated building downtown, and his place was impeccably decorated. Everything was clean and organized, almost too perfect. But I chalked it up to him being a meticulous person. That night, after ordering takeout and watching a movie, things started to get a little strange. He kept making these odd comments about how lucky he was to have me, how I was different from other girls, how he had been searching for someone like me his whole life. It was sweet at first, but the intensity of his words started to make me feel a little uneasy. Over the next few weeks, the little things started to add up. He would call me multiple times a day just to check in. He started showing up at my work unannounced, bringing me lunch or flowers. He wanted to know where I was and what I was doing at all times. If I didn't respond to his texts immediately, he would get anxious and ask if everything was okay. I tried to brush it off as him being overly affectionate, but a nagging feeling kept telling me something was off. Maybe it was just me, I thought. Maybe I was projecting my past relationship baggage onto him. I've been cheated on, so I was trying to be cautious. So I pushed those thoughts aside and tried to focus on the positive aspects of our relationship. Then came the incident with my ex. My ex-boyfriend, Tom, reached out to me out of the blue. He wanted to apologize for how things ended and see if we could be friends. I wasn't particularly interested, but I agreed to meet him for coffee. It was a brief, uneventful encounter. We talked for about an hour, and then I went home. The next day, Derek was furious. He accused me of lying to him. I was still having feelings for Tom. He said he had seen us together at the coffee shop, which was true, and he couldn't believe I would betray him like that. I tried to explain that it was just a friendly conversation, but he wouldn't listen. He went on and on about how he couldn't trust me, how I was just like all the other girls who had hurt him in the past. It was a completely irrational reaction, and it scared me. After that, I started being more careful around Derek. I tried to avoid talking about my past, and I made sure to always keep him informed of my whereabouts. I felt like I was walking in eggshells, constantly afraid of setting him off. One night, I was at Derek's apartment, waiting for him to come back from a quick errand. I was bored, so I started idly browsing through his bookshelves. As I was reaching for a book, I noticed that his closet door was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a peek inside. The closet was neatly organized with rows of shirts and pants hanging in perfect order. But then I noticed something strange, a small wooden panel at the back of the closet. It looked out of place, like it didn't belong there. I reached out and touched the panel, and to my surprise, it slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. My heart started racing. What was he hiding? I reached inside and pulled out a small metal box. It was locked. I desperately tried to pry it open. After a few attempts, the latch broke and the box popped open. Inside, I found a stack of photographs. There were pictures of me. Pictures taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me at my apartment, at work, at the gym. Pictures of me walking down the street, laughing with my friends, talking on the phone. Pictures of me doing the most mundane things, all captured without my permission. I felt a chill run down my spine. He had been stalking me. He had been watching me. All those times I felt like I was being followed. All those times I had a nagging feeling that someone was watching me. It was him. Then I saw something else in the box. A small black notebook. I opened it and started reading. It was a diary. Derek's diary. And the entries were filled with disturbing details about his obsession with me. He wrote about how he had been following me for months before we even met, how he had been learning everything about me. He wrote about how he felt like we were meant to be together, how I was his soulmate. He wrote about how he couldn't stand the thought of me being with anyone else. And then I read the last entry. I know she's been seeing Tom again, he wrote. She thinks she can hide it from me, but I know the truth. I can't let her get away with this. I have to show her that I'm the only one for her. I have to teach her a lesson. I slammed the notebook shut, my hands trembling. I knew I had to get out of there. I had to escape before he came back. I quickly put the photographs and the diary back in the box, closed the hidden compartment, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I reached my own apartment. I locked the door, closed the blinds, and called the police. It took my statement and promise to investigate. They went to Derek's apartment, but he was gone. They found the hidden compartment, the photographs, and the diary. They issued a warrant for his arrest, but he was never found. He disappeared without a trace. I don't know where Derek is or what he's doing, but I know that I'll never forget what happened. I thought I was being paranoid, but it turned out my instincts were right. There's no big conclusion to this story. I just hate that I found the hidden compartment. I need to warn others about what happened to me because I truly believe that if I hadn't trusted my gut and acted fast, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. This isn't a ghost story or a tale of demonic possession. This is about a person, a seemingly normal guy who was capable of unspeakable things, hiding behind a facade of charm and normalcy. It started like any other online dating experience. I was in my late 20s, recently divorced, and tentatively dipping my toes back into the dating pool. I signed up for one of those apps that promised to focus on serious relationships, hoping to avoid the hookup culture I wasn't interested in. I matched with a guy named Gary. His profile was innocuous: hiking pictures, a couple of shots with his dog, a brief bio about loving the outdoors and reading. We'd messaged back and forth for a week or so, and he seemed genuinely kind and intelligent. He asked thoughtful questions about my life, my interests, and my goals. He was a teacher, which I found attractive. I liked the idea of someone who dedicated their life to helping others. We met for coffee at a local cafe. He was even more handsome in person, with a warm smile and an easy laugh. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. There were no red flags, no awkward silences, no weird vibes. I left the date feeling optimistic, even excited. We went on several more dates over the next few weeks. We hiked, went to the movies, and cooked dinner at my apartment. He was always respectful, considerate, and attentive. He seemed to genuinely care about my happiness. He even helped me fix a leaky faucet, proving he was more than just a pretty face. I was starting to fall for him. But then subtle things started to change. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced. He'd say he was just in the neighborhood or that he wanted to surprise me. I initially brushed it off as him being sweet and spontaneous, but it started to feel a little possessive. He also started asking more and more questions about my past relationships, specifically about why they ended. He seemed overly interested in my vulnerabilities, my insecurities, and my fears. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie. He started talking about his own past, about a difficult childhood and a failed marriage. He became increasingly emotional, his voice cracking with suppressed anger. He told me he'd been hurt badly and that he was afraid of being hurt again. He started crying, and I, being the empathetic person I am, tried to comfort him. I held him in my arms and told him everything would be okay. That's when he snapped. His grip tightened on my arms, and he looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. His eyes were cold, hard, and filled with a chilling rage. "You won't hurt me, will you?" he whispered, his voice low and menacing. "You won't leave me like she did." I was terrified. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. His grip was like steel. "Gary, you're hurting me," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He just stared at me, his eyes boring into my soul. I knew in that moment that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't the kind, gentle man I thought I knew. This was someone else, someone dangerous, hiding beneath a carefully constructed mask. I had to think fast. I knew that if I panicked or tried to fight him, things could escalate quickly. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Gary, I would never hurt you," I said, forcing a smile. "I care about you, but you're scaring me. You need to let go." He hesitated for a moment, his grip loosening slightly. Then slowly he released my arms. The rage in his eyes seemed to dissipate, replaced by a look of confusion and regret. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to. I get scared sometimes." I didn't believe him for a second, but I played along. I acted like everything was okay, like I wasn't terrified for my life. I made him some tea and talked to him in a soothing voice. I told him I understood his fears and that I would never do anything to hurt him. I slowly guided him to the door, promising to talk more about it later. As soon as he was gone, I locked the door, bolted the windows, and called the police. I told them everything that had happened about his possessiveness, his anger, and the chilling look in his eyes. They took my statement and said they would investigate. They discovered that Gary had a history of domestic violence. His ex-wife had filed a restraining order against him after he had physically assaulted her. He had managed to keep it hidden from his dating profile. Gary was arrested the next day. He was charged with assault and violating the restraining order. He's now in prison. I need to warn others because I was so lucky. I trusted my gut. I didn't ignore the little things, and I acted fast. I share this story not for sympathy, but to remind everyone, especially women, to trust their instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags, no matter how charming or seemingly harmless the person may be. Protect yourself, because you never know what someone is truly capable of. I shudder to think about what might have happened if I hadn't recognized the danger signs or if I had hesitated to act. So trust me, and trust yourself. I need to share this terrifying experience. It still gives me chills just thinking about it, and honestly, I've never really told anyone the whole story. Partly because it sounds insane, and partly because I'm still not sure I fully understand it myself. It started, innocently enough, with the wrong number. It was late one Tuesday night. I was working on a paper for my history class when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Hello," I said. A man's voice, deep and raspy, responded, Is Anissa there?" "Sorry, wrong number," I replied, about to hang up. "Wait," he said quickly. "Are you alone?" That was the first red flag, I guess, but I was tired and didn't really think much of it. "Yeah, I'm alone. But you still have the wrong number," I said, and hung up. I went back to my paper, but the call bothered me. It was just the way he asked if I was alone, like he already knew the answer. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. The next night, the same number called again. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Anissa," the same voice asked. Look, you have the wrong number again. Stop calling me, I said, annoyed. But I know you're there, he whispered. I can hear you. That's when I felt a chill run down my spine. How could he hear me? I looked around my apartment, making sure all the windows were closed and the doors were locked. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking slightly. There was a long pause, and then he said, I'm watching you, Anissa. I slammed the phone down and turned it off. My heart was pounding in my chest. I was terrified. I went through the apartment, checking every lock, every window. Everything seemed secure, but I still felt like I was being watched. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little noise made me jump. I kept imagining someone standing outside my window watching me. The next day, I told a friend about the calls. She dismissed them as a prank and told me to just ignore them. She said it was probably just some bored teenager trying to scare me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more than just a prank. That night, the call started again. Only this time, he wasn't just calling. He was texting. The first text came late in the evening. Nice curtains. My blood ran cold. My living room curtains were closed, but how did he know what they looked like? I ran to the window and peeked through a gap in the curtains. I didn't see anyone outside. More texts followed, reading a history book. How boring. Pizza for dinner? Good choice. Wearing a blue sweater tonight, I see. He was describing everything I was doing, everything I was wearing, everything in my apartment. He was watching me. I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police. I had no proof, just a series of creepy calls and texts. I spent the next few days living in a state of constant terror. I stayed inside, afraid to go out. I kept all the lights on and the curtains closed. I jumped at every sound. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. One night, I was sitting on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from the same number. Open the door. I want to talk. I froze. I couldn't breathe. He was here, outside my apartment. I didn't move. I just stared at my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. Another text came. I know you're scared, Anissa, but I just want to help you. Help me? How could he possibly help me? He was the one terrorizing me. I didn't respond. I just sat there, listening for any sign of movement outside my door. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a soft knock. My entire body went numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, frozen with fear. The knocking came again, louder this time. Anissa, please, open the door. I promise I won't hurt you, the voice said from the other side. It was the same deep, raspy voice from the calls. I knew I shouldn't open the door. I knew it was a trap. But curiosity, or maybe a desperate need for it to end, overrode my fear. Slowly, trembling, I got up from the couch and walked to the door. I peered through the peephole, but I didn't see anyone. Hello, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Look down, the voice said. I lowered my gaze and saw a small white envelope lie on the floor in front of my door. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the door and reached for the envelope. As I picked it up, I saw a figure dart around the corner at the end of the hallway. It was too quick to make out any details, but I knew it was him. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. I ripped open the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. On it was written a single word, run. Run? What did that mean? Run where? Run from what? Before I could process it, my phone buzzed again. It was another text. He's closer than you think. He. Who was he talking about? And who was he? What was Amos? I ran to the window and looked out, and that's when I saw him. Across the street, standing under a streetlight, was a man staring directly at my apartment. He was tall and thin, wearing a long, dark coat. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys and my purse and ran out the back door of my apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached a busy street several blocks away. I never looked back. I spent the next few weeks staying with friends, constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my phone number and moved to a new apartment. I tried to put the whole experience behind me, but it was impossible. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. Was he just a stalker? Or was it something more sinister? All I know is that he was watching me, and he knew things he shouldn't have known. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my apartment, I still get the feeling that I'm being watched. And I still wonder if he's out there somewhere waiting for me. I should have trusted my instincts when he said he collected antique dolls. I mean, I know that sounds judgmental and maybe even a little cliche, but there was just something off about the way he said it. Like it wasn't a hobby, but an obsession. But I was trying to be open-minded, trying not to judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a man by his creepy doll collection. His name was Arthur. I met him on a hiking trail. He was attractive enough, in a quirky, bookish kind of way. We chatted about nature, our favorite trails, and eventually he mentioned his collection. I remember laughing nervously and making some joke about Chucky, but he didn't laugh. He just stared at me with those unsettlingly intense eyes and said, "These aren't playthings, they're pieces of history." We went out a few times after that. Dinners, movies, that sort of thing. He was always polite, always a gentleman, but there was always this undercurrent of something. A weird intensity that made me uncomfortable. He talked about the dolls for hours, describing their intricate details, their historical significance, their personalities. He had names for all of them. He eventually invited me back to his place. He lived in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, the kind of house that always seems to be shrouded in shadows, even on the sunniest days. I hesitated, I really did. My gut was screaming at me to turn around and run, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a house. And he was just a guy with a weird hobby. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I'd made a mistake. The house was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of dust and mothballs. But it was the dolls that were the real problem. They were everywhere, lining the hallways, sitting on the furniture, staring down from shelves. Hundreds of them. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I moved through the room. They watched me. Arthur led me into the living room, which was even more crowded with dolls in the hallway. He gestured proudly to his collection. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice filled with a strange sort of reverence. I forced a smile. "It's impressive," I said, trying not to sound as freaked out as I felt. He picked up one of the dolls, a porcelain-faced one with a frilly dress and vacant eyes. "This is Beatrice," he said, stroking her hair. "She's my favorite. She's been with me for a long time." He started talking about Beatrice and all of her history, how he rescued her from an antique store. He talked and talked, his voice growing more and more animated. I stood there, frozen in place, feeling like I was trapped in some kind of twisted dollhouse. Then he turned to me, his eyes gleaming with a strange light. "I have something to show you," he said. He led me down a narrow hallway to a door at the very end. He unlocked the door and pushed it open, revealing a small, dark room. He flicked on the light and gasped. The room was filled with more dolls, but these weren't the pristine, antique dolls from the living room. These were broken, disfigured, and utterly terrifying. Some were missing limbs, others had cracked faces, and still others were covered in what looked like dried blood. "These are my special ones," Arthur said, his voice a low whisper. "These are the ones that understand me." He picked up one of the dolls, a raggedy thing with a missing eye and a stitched-up mouth. "This is Clara," he said. "She's been through a lot." He started talking to Clara, whispering things I couldn't understand. He held her close, rocking her back and forth. I stood there watching him, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned to leave, but Arthur blocked my path. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice suddenly cold. I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not feeling well." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predatory smile, the kind a wolf gives before it attacks. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "You're going to stay here with me. With us." He reached out and grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. "Let go of me," I screamed. He laughed, a harsh, chilling sound that echoed through the room. "You're one of us now," he said. "You belong here." He started dragging me deeper into the room toward the broken dolls. I struggled against him, kicking and screaming, but it was no use. He was too strong. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A heavy ceramic doll lying on a nearby shelf. I reached out and grabbed it, and with all my strength I swung it at Arthur's head. The doll connected with a sickening thud. Arthur stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. He loosened his grip on my arm, and I pulled away. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I ran out of the room, out of the house, and didn't stop running until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car and begged them to take me to the police station. The police raided Arthur's house. They found me tied up in the basement surrounded by his dolls. They found evidence of other women who had gone missing in the area. Arthur was arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. I testified against him at his trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. I still have nightmares about that house, those dolls. I still can't shake the feeling that I was almost one of them. I should have trusted my instincts when he said he collected antique dolls. I should have turned around and run the other way. This is a true story that still haunts me, a constant, low-humming dread that bubbles up whenever I think about online dating. It wasn't a dramatic abduction or a violent attack, but a slow, creeping realization that I had invited something truly wrong into my life, something I still can't quite define. It started innocently enough. I was in my late 20s, recently single, and feeling the pressure to get back out there. Everyone kept telling me about Hinge, how it was more curated than Tinder, more serious than Bumble. So I made a profile, swiped through a few faces, and eventually matched with a guy named Marcus. Marcus seemed normal. His profile was full of pictures of him hiking, playing with his dog, and hanging out with friends. He had a good job, a nice smile, and a witty bio. We chatted for a week or so, and the conversation flowed easily. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a few days, he asked me out for coffee. Our first date was perfectly pleasant. We met at a small cafe in my neighborhood, talked for hours about our families, our jobs, and our dreams for the future. He was a good listener, and I felt comfortable and at ease around him. There weren't any immediate red flags, no glaring personality quirks. He just seemed like a nice, normal guy. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We saw a movie, went to a museum, and even cooked dinner at my apartment one night. He was always respectful, considerate, and charming. My friends liked him, my family liked him, and I started to think that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found a good one. But then things started to shift. Subtle things at first, barely noticeable, but enough to make me feel uneasy. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. Once, I was grabbing lunch with a friend at a cafe across town, and he just happened to be there in the neighborhood. Another time, I was browsing a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon, and he popped up behind me. Just thought I'd say hi. It was always played off as a coincidence, a lucky encounter, but it started to feel deliberate. Then he started mirroring my habits. If I mentioned I liked a certain band, he'd suddenly become a huge fan. If I expressed interest in a particular book, he'd already read it and had a detailed analysis ready to go. It was flattering at first, but it soon became unsettling. It felt like he was trying to become me, to mold himself into my perfect partner. He also started becoming overly possessive. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, wanting to know what I was doing and who I was with. He'd get visibly jealous if I mentioned spending time with other friends, especially male friends. He wanted to be the center of my world, and he didn't seem to understand that I had a life outside of him. One night, I was at a party with some friends, and he called me incessantly. I didn't answer, wanting to enjoy my time with my friends. When I finally checked my phone later, there were dozens of missed calls and angry text messages, accusing me of ignoring him and being disrespectful. I tried to explain that I was just having fun with my friends, but he wouldn't listen. He said I was being selfish and that I didn't care about his feelings. That's when I realized that something was seriously wrong. This wasn't normal behavior. This wasn't a healthy relationship. This was something else entirely. I decided to break up with him. I told him that I didn't think we were a good match and that I needed some space. He didn't take it well. He begged me to reconsider, promising to change, to be better. But I stood my ground. I knew that I couldn't stay in that relationship, no matter how much he pleaded. After the breakup, things got even weirder. He started stalking me. He'd drive by my apartment at night, park across the street, and just sit there, watching. He'd call me from blocked numbers, whispering cryptic messages and then hanging up. He'd send me emails with disturbing images and unsettling poems. I was terrified. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I told my friends and family about what was happening, and they helped me keep an eye out for him. I even considered getting a restraining order, but I didn't have enough concrete evidence to prove that he was a threat. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my bedroom window. I peeked through the curtains and saw him standing in my backyard, staring up at my window. He was holding something in his hand, but I couldn't make out what it was in the dark. I screamed and ran to the phone, calling the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but couldn't find him. They told me to stay inside and to call them immediately if I saw him again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room clutching a knife, waiting for him to come back. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, sent shivers down my spine. He eventually stopped stalking me. I don't know why. Maybe he got bored, maybe he found another target, or maybe he finally realized that I wasn't coming back. But the fear never really went away. I still have nightmares about him. I still jump at every unexpected noise, and I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there somewhere, watching, waiting. This is a true story that still haunts me. It taught me that you can never really know someone, not even someone you've dated for months. It taught me that even the most normal-seeming person can be hiding a dark secret, and it taught me that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones that creep up on you slowly, the ones that hide in plain sight, disguised as love and affection. Now I have trust issues, a door camera, and a large dog. I need to warn others about what happened to me, even if it makes me sound crazy. I don't care. Maybe someone will read this and it will prevent them from making the same mistake I did. It started innocently enough. I met a guy named Caleb on a hiking group meetup. He was quiet, a bit nerdy, but seemed genuinely kind and interested in nature, which is a huge turn-on for me. We bonded over a shared love for obscure wildflowers and the annoyance of people who blast music on the trails. After a few weeks of hiking together, he asked me out on a real date. I said yes. Our first few dates were great. We went to a local brewery, saw an indie film, and even volunteered at an animal shelter. He was always respectful, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely invested in getting to know me. There were no red flags, no weird vibes. I actually started to think I had finally met someone who was actually a good person. Then he suggested we go camping. I love camping. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I was excited. Caleb said he knew a secluded spot in the mountains, far from any established campgrounds. It sounded perfect. We packed our gear, loaded up his car, and drove out to the trailhead. The hike in was beautiful. The trail wound through dense forests, past rushing streams, and up to a stunning vista overlooking the valley. Caleb was knowledgeable about the local flora and fauna, pointing out different types of trees and identifying bird calls. He was in his element, and I was enjoying myself immensely. We reached the campsite late in the afternoon. It was a small clearing nestled among the trees with a fire pit and a flat area for our tents. We set up camp, gathered firewood, and cooked dinner over the fire. As the sun set, the forest grew quiet and the stars began to appear in the sky. That's when things started to feel off. Caleb became strangely silent. He stopped making eye contact with me and started staring into the fire. He kept fidgeting, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I asked him if everything was okay, but he just mumbled something about being tired. As the night wore on, his behavior grew more erratic. He started pacing around the campsite, muttering to himself. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but it sounded like he was arguing with someone. I asked him again if he was okay, and this time he snapped at me. "Just leave me alone," he said, his voice harsh and cold. "I need some space." I was taken aback. This wasn't the Caleb I had come to know over the past few weeks. This was someone else entirely. I decided to give him some space, hoping he would calm down. I crawled into my tent and tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I awoke with a start. My body felt cold and I was breathing heavy. It was pitch black outside, but the sound of rustling leaves and snapping twigs jolted me awake. The forest felt alive. I could hear Caleb outside, walking around the camp. After trying to ignore the sounds, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. As I exit the tent, Caleb looks at me with a smirk. The smirk felt different. "I thought you were asleep," Caleb said. "I heard noises. Is everything all right?" I said. "It's fine. You don't need to worry," Caleb stated. It was then I noticed Caleb was standing near the fire pit, which was nearly dead. He was holding something in his hand, something small and dark. As I looked closer, I realized it was a knife. My heart began to pound in my chest. I remembered how Caleb was acting more strange the closer we got to the location. Caleb never talked about coming here often and how secluded the place was. I took a step back, my mind racing. What was going on? Why was he holding a knife? Caleb, what are you doing? I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just stood there staring at me, the knife glinting in the dim light of the fire. His expression was blank, unreadable. He started to slowly advance towards me. Caleb, stop, I said, my voice rising in panic. You're scaring me. He didn't stop. He kept coming, his eyes fixed on me, the knife raised in his hand. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the darkness, the sound of Caleb's footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from him. I ran for what felt like hours, dodging trees and leaping over fallen logs. The forest seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing in on all sides. I could hear Caleb yelling my name, his voice growing closer. Finally, I stumbled upon a trail. I didn't know where it led, but it was better than nothing. I followed the trail, running as fast as my legs could carry me. I eventually made it back to the trailhead, exhausted and terrified. I ran to my car, fumbled with the keys, and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I went straight to the police station. I told the police everything that had happened, but they didn't seem to believe me. They said Caleb was a respected member of the community, a volunteer firefighter, and a regular churchgoer. They said I was probably just mistaken, that I had misinterpreted his actions. They also said that I was camping illegally and that I could get fined. They did agree to send an officer out to the campsite to check on Caleb, but when they got there, he was gone. The campsite was empty, and there was no sign of him. The police concluded that I was delusional, that I had imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. Caleb tried to hurt me, and I barely escaped with my life. I need to warn others about him. I need to tell people that he's not who he seems to be. He's dangerous, and he's out there somewhere, waiting to hurt someone else. If you're reading this, please be careful. Don't trust anyone too easily, and always trust your gut. I don't know what Caleb's intentions are or why he took me to a secluded place. I keep replaying this nightmare in my head over and over, like a broken record stuck on the most terrifying groove. It started so innocently, as these things often do. I was fresh out of a long-term relationship, feeling cautiously optimistic about dipping my toes back into the dating pool. Everyone told me to try Hinge, that it was for people who actually want relationships. So I made a profile, carefully curated my photos, and crafted a bio that was both witty and vaguely intriguing. That's where I met Julian. He was different. Not in a bad way at first. He was an artist, a painter, and his profile was full of these moody, atmospheric landscapes. He quoted poetry, talked about existentialism, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. He wasn't like the other guys, the ones who just wanted to hook up or talk about sports. He was deeper, or so I thought. We messaged back and forth for a few weeks, building this intense, almost intimate connection. He was incredibly articulate, able to express complex emotions with ease. He made me feel seen, understood, like he truly got me. We bonded over our shared love of art, music, and long, philosophical conversations. I was smitten completely and utterly. Finally, we decided to meet in person. He suggested a small, out-of-the-way art gallery opening. It seemed fitting given his profession. The gallery was in a part of town I wasn't familiar with, a little rundown and gritty, but I was excited to see his work and spend time with him in person. When I arrived, Julian was waiting for me outside. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and a disarming smile. He greeted me with a warm hug, and I instantly felt a flutter of butterflies in my stomach. The gallery itself was small and dimly lit. The artwork was odd. Lots of abstract pieces, dark colors, and unsettling imagery. But Julian seemed to know all the artists and curators, introducing me to everyone with a proprietary air. He was charming and engaging, and I found myself falling even harder for him. After the gallery, he suggested we grab dinner at a nearby restaurant. The restaurant was even more off the beaten path than the gallery. It was tucked away on a deserted side street, with no sign and a flickering neon light above the door. It looked sketchy, to say the least, but I was so caught up in the moment, so eager to impress him, that I didn't question it. The inside of the restaurant was even stranger. It was dimly lit with mismatched furniture and walls covered in bizarre artwork. The other patrons were an eclectic mix of artists, musicians, and what looked like cult members. There was this palpable sense of unease in the air, but I tried to ignore it. Julian seemed perfectly at home, ordering for both of us in a language I didn't understand. The food was unusual. Exotic meats, strange vegetables, and sauces that tasted both sweet and slightly metallic. I tried to be polite, but I could barely stomach it. As the night wore on, Julian's behavior started to change. He became more intense, more possessive. He kept touching me, stroking my hair, whispering things in my ear. He started talking about how we were meant to be together, that our connection was destined. It was flattering at first, but then it started to feel suffocating. Then he suggested we go back to his studio. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But he was so persuasive, so insistent, that I eventually relented. Just to see my paintings, he said with that disarming smile. I want to share my world with you. His studio was even more unsettling than the restaurant. It was a large, cavernous space filled with canvases covered in disturbing images. There were portraits of women with vacant eyes and twisted smiles, landscapes that seemed to writhe and contort before my very eyes. The air was thick with the smell of paint and something else, something acrid and unsettling. As I wandered around the studio, Julian began to talk about his art in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. He talked about capturing souls, about channeling dark energies, about the power of suffering. His eyes were wild, his voice low and intense. Then he led me to a corner of the studio that was shrouded in shadow. He pulled back a curtain, revealing a large canvas that was covered in a dark, viscous substance. This, he said, his voice barely a whisper, is my masterpiece. He reached out and touched the canvas, smearing the dark substance on his fingers. Then he reached for me. I recoiled, terrified. What are you doing? I stammered. He smiled, a slow, predatory grin. I'm going to make you part of my art, he said. You're going to be my muse. That's when I realized the truth. Julian wasn't an artist. He was a psychopath. I tried to run, but he grabbed me, pinning me against the wall. I struggled, but he was too strong. He started kissing me, his lips cold and clammy. I tasted blood. I managed to break free and ran towards the door, but he caught me again, dragging me back into the studio. He threw me onto a nearby couch, and I landed hard, knocking the wind out of me. He stood over me, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. He reached for a knife that was lying on a nearby table. I screamed. I don't remember much after that, just flashes of violence, of pain, of terror. I remember fighting, clawing, biting. I remember the smell of blood, the sound of my own screams. I woke up hours later, lying on the floor of the studio. Julian was gone. I was covered in blood and bruised and battered. I managed to stumble out of the studio and flag down a passing car. The police were called. Julian was eventually apprehended, but the trial was a nightmare. His lawyer tried to paint me as a crazy, delusional woman, but the evidence was overwhelming. Julian was found guilty of assault, kidnapping, and attempted murder. He's in prison now, hopefully for the rest of his life. But the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. I still have nightmares about that night, of Julian's twisted smile, about the darkness in his eyes. I keep replaying this nightmare in my head over and over, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand how I could have been so blind, so naive. I am so scared to even look at Hinge after what happened. Dating apps ruined dating in general. This is a true story that still haunts me, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most ordinary situations can mask the most terrifying realities. It happened during my sophomore year of college. I was young, naive, and eager to experience everything life had to offer, including the dating scene. I met him at a party, Liam. He was a graduate student, older and seemingly more mature than the other guys I had been meeting. He was tall, with piercing blue eyes and a charismatic smile that made me feel instantly at ease. He was studying psychology, which I found fascinating, and he seemed genuinely interested in my own studies and aspirations. We exchanged numbers and began texting. The conversations were stimulating and insightful. He spoke intelligently about books, philosophy, and the human mind. He seemed to understand me in a way that no one else ever had. He made me feel special, understood, and valued. I was quickly falling for him. Our first date was at a small, cozy bookstore cafe. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we discussed everything from our childhood dreams to our deepest fears. He was attentive, asking thoughtful questions and actively listening to my responses. He shared his own vulnerabilities, revealing his insecurities and past struggles. It felt like we were building a real connection, a bond based on mutual understanding and respect. Over the next few weeks, we became inseparable. We went on hikes, attended concerts, and cooked meals together at my dorm room. He was always respectful and considerate, never pushing boundaries or making me feel uncomfortable. He was the perfect gentleman, the kind of guy my parents would have loved. I was convinced that I had found the one. Then things started to change. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. He started asking more personal questions, probing into my past relationships and my family dynamics. He seemed particularly interested in my childhood traumas, wanting to know every detail of my difficult experiences. At first, I thought he was just being caring and empathetic, trying to understand me on a deeper level. But his questions became increasingly intrusive and uncomfortable. He started exhibiting strange behavior. He would show up unannounced at my dorm room, claiming he was just checking on me. He would call and text me incessantly, demanding to know my whereabouts at all times. He became possessive and jealous, questioning my friendships and accusing me of flirting with other guys. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that he was just insecure and that I needed to be more understanding. One evening, we were at a party when I ran into an old friend. We hugged hello and chatted for a few minutes. Liam's demeanor changed instantly. He became cold and distant, glaring at my friend with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. When we left the party, he unleashed a torrent of accusations, accusing me of betraying him and flirting with my friend. I tried to defend myself, but he wouldn't listen. He was consumed by jealousy and rage. The argument escalated quickly. He started yelling, his voice booming through the quiet street. He grabbed my arm tightly, his grip bruising my skin. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. I started to feel scared, realizing that this wasn't the man I thought I knew. He dragged me back to my dorm room, his grip tightening with each step. Once inside, he slammed the door shut and locked it. I was trapped. He continued to yell and scream, his words laced with venom and hatred. He accused me of lying, of cheating, of destroying his life. I tried to reason with him, but it was no use. He was beyond reason. He began pacing back and forth, his eyes darting around the room. He was agitated and unpredictable, like a caged animal ready to pounce. I felt a surge of fear, realizing that I was in real danger. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his eyes burning with a cold, unsettling intensity. He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent shivers down my spine. He said, his voice low and menacing, "I've been watching you for a long time." My blood ran cold. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew it wasn't good. He continued, "I know everything about you. Your fears, your secrets, your weaknesses." He began to recount details of my life, things that I had never told him, things that only a stalker would know. He knew about my childhood home, my family's financial struggles, my deepest insecurities. He knew everything. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. I realized that I had been living a lie, that the man I thought I knew was a figment of my imagination. The real Liam was a monster, a predator who had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat. I screamed, a primal scream of terror. I fought back with all my might, kicking and scratching, trying to break free from his grasp. Fortunately, my roommate heard the commotion and came to my rescue. She burst through the door and confronted Liam, giving me the opportunity to escape. I ran out of the dorm room and didn't stop running until I reached the campus security office. I reported Liam to the police and he was arrested a few days later. It turned out that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been watching me for months, gathering information about my life and waiting for the right moment to make his move. I pressed charges against him, and he was eventually convicted and sentenced to prison. But the trauma of that experience still lingers. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his piercing blue eyes and his chilling smile. I learned a valuable lesson that day, a lesson that I will never forget. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most charming, the ones who make you feel special and understood. It's important to trust your instincts, to pay attention to red flags, and to never ignore the feeling that something is not right. This true story continues to haunt me, A chilling reminder that sometimes the most ordinary situations can mask the most terrifying realities. I need to warn others about what happened to me during what was supposed to be a fun, romantic getaway. You see stories online all the time, but you never think they'll happen to you. I was wrong. Dead wrong. It started like any other modern romance, a dating app. I matched with a guy named Darren. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for weeks before finally deciding to meet in person. Our first few dates were great. He was attentive, respectful, and we seemed to have a lot in common. I started to let my guard down, thinking I'd finally found someone special. After a few months of dating, Darren suggested we take a weekend trip to a remote cabin in the mountains. He said it would be a chance for us to escape the city, relax, and connect on a deeper level. I was hesitant at first. It seemed like a big step, but he was so persuasive, and I really wanted to get away. Plus, the pictures of the cabin looked idyllic, cozy, secluded, and surrounded by nature. I agreed. The drive to the cabin was long and winding, taking us further and further away from civilization. As we drove deeper into the mountains, I started to feel a sense of unease. The scenery was beautiful, but the isolation was unsettling. We finally arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon. It was even more remote than I had imagined, nestled deep in the woods, with no other houses in sight. The cabin itself was rustic but charming, with a stone fireplace, a cozy living room, and a small kitchen. Darren started a fire, and we spent the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. The uneasy feeling I had earlier started to fade, and I began to relax. That night, things took a turn for the worse. We were sitting by the fire, drinking wine, when Darren started acting strange. He became distant, almost cold, and his eyes took on a glassy look. He started asking me personal questions about my past, my fears, my insecurities. The questions were probing and uncomfortable, and I felt like he was trying to dig up something I didn't want to share. I tried to change the subject, but he persisted. He became more and more agitated, his voice growing louder and more aggressive. I started to feel scared. I told him I was tired and wanted to go to bed. He didn't try to stop me, but his eyes followed me as I walked to the bedroom. I locked the bedroom door and crawled into bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I lay there in the dark, listening to the wind howling outside and the creaking of the cabin. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep, but my sleep was fitful and filled with nightmares. I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange noise. It sounded like someone was scratching at the door. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and listened more closely. The scratching persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I was terrified. I grabbed my phone and tried to call for help, but there was no cell service. We were completely isolated. I knew I was on my own. The scratching stopped, and I heard the doorknob rattling. I held my breath, fearing that Darren was trying to break into the room. The doorknob jiggled for a few minutes, then stopped. I lay there, frozen with fear, wondering what was going to happen next. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. Darren stood in the doorway, his eyes wide and manic. He was holding a large hunting knife. I screamed and scrambled to the corner of the room, cowering in fear. He lunged at me, knife raised, his face contorted in a terrifying grin. I screamed again and threw a pillow at him, hoping to distract him. The pillow hit him in the face, momentarily disorienting him. I seized the opportunity and scrambled out of bed, running towards the bedroom window. I smashed the window with a chair and climbed out, cutting myself on the broken glass. I didn't care. I had to get away. I ran into the woods, barefoot in my pajamas, with Darren close behind. I ran as fast as I could, dodging trees and leaping over logs. I could hear Darren's heavy breathing behind me, and I knew he was gaining on me. I stumbled and fell, scraping my knees and hands. I got up and kept running, determined to survive. After what seemed like an eternity, I stumbled upon a small road. I ran towards it, waving my arms and screaming for help. A car finally stopped, and a kind woman pulled over and let me in. I told her what had happened, and she drove me to the nearest police station. The police launched a search for Darren, and he was eventually apprehended. He was charged with attempted murder and is now in prison. I learned later that he had a history of mental illness and had been planning the trip for weeks, intending to harm me. I'm still recovering from the trauma of what happened, but I'm grateful to be alive. I'm sharing my story to warn others about the dangers of trusting someone you've met online, especially when they suggest isolating you. Always trust your instincts, and never let anyone pressure you into doing something that makes you uncomfortable. If I hadn't ran, there is no telling what could have happened. I still can't believe this actually happened. Seriously, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, and have to remind myself it wasn't some elaborate, terrifying dream. It all started with a seemingly normal conversation on Bumble. His name was Malcolm, and his profile was, well, let's just say he knew how to take a good picture. He was outdoorsy, liked dogs, and apparently was a master chef according to his bio. Classic Bumble bait. We chatted for a week or so, mostly about hiking trails and our favorite restaurants. He seemed genuinely nice, intelligent, and let's be honest, incredibly attractive. So when he suggested we go on a camping trip, I was hesitant, but also intrigued. I hadn't been camping in years, but I loved the idea of getting away from the city for a weekend. Plus, I figured it would be a good way to see if there was any real chemistry between us. I should have known something was off when he insisted on picking me up. Normally, I prefer to drive myself to first dates, just in case I need a quick escape route. But he was so insistent, saying he knew a secret spot that was impossible to find without specific directions. I caved, telling myself I was being overly cautious. The drive was longer than I expected, winding through increasingly narrow and unpaved roads. My phone lost service about an hour in, which Malcolm brushed off, saying it was good to disconnect from the world. Okay, maybe. But I was starting to feel a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. We finally arrived at the secret spot, a secluded clearing deep in the woods. It was pretty, I'll give him that. But there was something unsettling about the silence, the way the trees seemed to loom over us. Malcolm was unfazed, immediately setting about unloading the car and setting up the tent. That's when I noticed something else that made me uneasy. He had packed an absurd amount of gear, not just camping essentials, but things like a match sheet, a shovel, and a roll of heavy-duty duct tape. I tried to play it cool, asking him why he needed so much stuff. He just laughed and said, "Better to be prepared, right?" As the sun began to set, the woods grew darker and the air colder. Malcolm started a fire and began cooking dinner, some kind of elaborate stew that smelled vaguely gamey. I wasn't hungry, but I forced myself to eat a few bites, just to be polite. After dinner, we sat by the fire, talking about, I don't even remember what we talked about. I was too busy trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread that was building inside me. Malcolm seemed to be enjoying himself, though. He kept staring at me with this intense, almost possessive look in his eyes that made my skin crawl. Then he started telling stories. Not normal friendly stories, but dark, disturbing tales about people who had gotten lost in the woods and never been seen again. He spoke in a low, hushed voice, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. I tried to change the subject, but he kept steering the conversation back to these morbid stories. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him I was tired and wanted to go to bed. He didn't argue, but as I crawled into the tent, I could feel his eyes on me watching me. I couldn't sleep. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through me. I lay there in the darkness, listening to Malcolm breathing heavily outside the tent, wondering what I had gotten myself into. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy through the woods. I held my breath, listening intently. The noise grew closer and closer, until it was right outside the tent. Then I heard Malcolm's voice. He was talking to someone, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I strained my ears, trying to catch a word, but all I heard was a low murmur. Suddenly, the tent flap was ripped open. I screamed, scrambling backwards as Malcolm stood there, silhouetted against the moonlight. He was holding the mesh sheet. But it wasn't Malcolm. Not the Malcolm I had met on Bumble. His eyes were wild, his face contorted into a grotesque grin. He looked insane. "It's time," he said, his voice raspy and distorted. "They're waiting." I didn't wait to find out who they were. I lunged past him, out of the tent, and into the darkness. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. I could hear Malcolm behind me, crashing through the underbrush, yelling my name. I ran for what felt like hours, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from him. Finally, I stumbled upon a dirt road. I ran along the road until I saw a light in the distance, a small cabin with a porch light on. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. An elderly couple answered, looking bewildered. I told them what had happened, battling incoherently about Malcolm and the matchet and the voices in the woods. They took me in, gave me a blanket and a cup of tea, and called the police. The police searched the woods for Malcolm, but they never found him. They found the campsite, the tent, the match sheet, but no sign of him. They questioned me extensively, but I couldn't give them much information. I didn't know who he was, where he came from, or what he wanted. To this day, I have no idea what happened that weekend. Was Malcolm a serial killer, a member of some kind of cult, or just a deeply disturbed individual who happened to have a Bumble profile? I'll probably never know. What I do know is that I'll never go on another camping trip with a stranger, and I'll definitely think twice before swiping right on anyone who claims to be a master chef. It's a scary reminder that you never truly know who's on the other side of that screen, and a good photo can hide a whole lot of crazy. I really can't believe this actually happened. Let me tell you about a horrifying experience. It didn't involve chainsaws, ghosts, or anything supernatural, but it still haunts me to this day. It was a kind of horror that creeps up on you slowly, like a shadow lengthening in the afternoon sun, until suddenly you're enveloped in darkness. It was a dating experience gone wrong, terribly wrong. I had just moved to a new city for a fresh start. Heartbroken from a previous relationship, I was hesitant to jump back into the dating pool, but my friends convinced me to give it a try. They said, just put yourself out there. You never know who you might meet. So I reluctantly created a profile on one of those popular dating apps. After a few weeks of swiping and awkward conversations, I matched with someone named Marv. Marv seemed normal enough at first. His profile was decent, with pictures of him hiking and playing guitar. He had a witty bio, and our initial conversations were easy and engaging. We talked about our interests, our favorite movies, and our plans for the future. He seemed like a genuine, down-to-earth guy. After a week of chatting online, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee date went well. Marv was even more charming in person. He was attentive, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for hours, and I found myself laughing and feeling comfortable around him. By the end of the date, I was actually excited about the possibility of a second one. He walked me back to my car, and we shared a brief but pleasant kiss. I drove home with a smile on my face, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had finally met someone special. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We went to the movies, had dinner at a nice restaurant, and even went for a hike in the nearby mountains. Each date seemed to solidify my initial impression of Marv. He was kind, intelligent, and adventurous. I started to let my guard down and open up to him about my past, my insecurities, and my dreams. He listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. I was falling for him hard. Then things started to change. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Marv started texting me more frequently, sometimes multiple times an hour. He wanted to know what I was doing at all times, who I was with, and where I was going. At first, I brushed it off as him being affectionate and interested in my life. But then the questions became more insistent, more demanding. He started getting jealous whenever I mentioned spending time with my friends, especially the male ones. He would grill me about who they were, how I knew them, and what we did together. He accused me of flirting with other guys and implied that I wasn't being honest with him. I tried to reassure him that he had nothing to worry about, but he wouldn't listen. His jealousy was consuming him, and it was starting to consume me too. The phone calls started late at night. He would call me at 2 or 3 in the morning, rambling incoherently about his insecurities and his fear of losing me. He would keep me on the phone for hours, preventing me from sleeping. I tried to set boundaries and tell him that I needed my rest, but he would guilt-trip me, saying that if I really cared about him, I would stay on the phone with him. I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Then he started showing up unannounced at my apartment. I would be relaxing at home, and suddenly, there would be a knock on my door, and it would be Marv. He would say that he just wanted to see me, that he missed me too much to stay away. But his visits felt like invasions of privacy. I started to feel like I couldn't even be alone in my own home. The final straw was when he started stalking me online. He created fake profiles on social media to monitor my activity. He would comment on my posts using different names, trying to provoke me or start arguments. He even hacked into my email account and started reading my personal messages. I was horrified. I felt like I was being watched, scrutinized, and controlled. I knew I had to end things, but I was scared. I had seen glimpses of a darker side of Marv, a side that was possessive, manipulative, and potentially dangerous. I was afraid of how he would react if I broke up with him. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, and she urged me to get out of the relationship immediately. She offered to stay with me for a few days while I broke up with him and changed my locks. The breakup was even worse than I had imagined. I met Marv at a public park, hoping that being in a crowded place would deter him from getting violent. I told him that I couldn't be in a relationship with him anymore, that his behavior was making me feel unsafe and unhappy. He started crying and begging me to reconsider. He promised to change, to get help, to do anything to win me back. When I stood my ground, I told him that it was over, that I needed to protect myself. His demeanor changed in an instant. His eyes turned cold, and his voice became menacing. He started yelling at me and calling me names, and accusing me of leading him on. He said that I would regret this, that I would never find anyone who loved me as much as he did. I turned and walked away as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I went straight to Sarah's apartment and stayed there for the next few days. I changed my phone number, deactivated my social media accounts, and filed a restraining order against Marv. It took me a long time to recover from that experience. I was traumatized, scared, and distrustful of everyone. I went to therapy to deal with the emotional fallout. I learned about the red flags of abusive relationships and how to protect myself from future predators. I'm still cautious when it comes to dating, but I refuse to let that one horrifying experience define me. I know that there are good people out there, people who are kind, respectful, and trustworthy. But I also know that it's important to be vigilant and to trust my instincts. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who hide in plain sight, disguised as charming, seemingly normal people. And that's the real horror of it all. To this day, I still get chills thinking about the dating app Soulmate Seeker and the profile that started it all. It wasn't even the profile itself that was immediately terrifying. It was more like a slow burn of dread that intensified over time, culminating in a night I desperately wish I could erase from my memory. I'd been single for a while, doing the whole dating app thing. Soulmate Seeker was new and supposedly catered to people looking for something deeper, something beyond just a casual hookup. I liked the idea, so I gave it a shot. That's when I came across the collector. His profile was minimal, almost unsettlingly so. One blurry photo that looked like it was taken in the middle of the night, showing only the back of his head. His bio simply read, "Looking for someone to appreciate the finer things in life." Vague, right? But something about it intrigued me. I was in a phase of being attracted to the mysterious types, so I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. The messages started innocently enough. He asked about my hobbies, my favorite books, my dreams. He was articulate, intelligent, and surprisingly attentive. He always remembered the details I shared, weaving them into our conversations later. He made me feel seen, understood, and dare I say special. But then the questions started getting odd. He'd ask about my routines, my habits, the places I frequented. He'd inquire about my security system, which I didn't have, who I lived with just me, and if I ever felt like I was being watched. I chalked it up to him being overly cautious, maybe even a little paranoid. I even joked about it once, saying, "Are you making sure I'm not a serial killer?" He didn't laugh. He just replied, "One can never be too careful." Despite the subtle creepiness, I was drawn to him. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world that mattered to him. So, after a couple of weeks of intense online conversation, we decided to meet in person. He suggested a secluded restaurant outside of the city, a place known for its unique ambience and exclusive clientele. Red flag number one, I know, but my curiosity got the best of me. Plus, he promised to tell me all about himself. The restaurant was even stranger than I imagined. It was tucked away in a forest, down a long, winding dirt road. The building itself was old and gothic, with dim lighting and heavy velvet curtains. The only other patrons were a handful of elderly couples, all dressed in formal attire and whispering to each other. The collector was already there when I arrived. He stood as I approached, and my breath caught in my throat. He was tall and thin, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. He was handsome, undeniably so, but there was something unsettling about his gaze, something cold and calculating. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He greeted me with a kiss on the hand, a gesture that felt both charming and strangely archaic. As we sat down, I noticed a small silver box sitting on the table. A gift, he explained, for someone who appreciates the finer things. Dinner started off smoothly. He was charming, witty, and attentive. He told me stories about his travels, his family, his passion for art. But the more he talked, the more I realized how little I actually knew about him. His answers were vague, almost evasive. When I pressed him for details, he'd deflect with a joke or a compliment. Then he gave me the gift. I opened the silver box, and inside was a small antique music box. It was beautiful, intricately carved with scenes of dancing figures. He wound it up, and a haunting melody filled the air. "It's a family heirloom," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "My grandmother gave it to me. She said it has the power to reveal one's true soul." As the music played, I started to feel strange. My head began to spin, and a wave of nausea washed over me. The faces of the other patrons seemed to blur, their whispers growing louder and more menacing. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. "Are you all right?" the collector asked, his voice laced with concern. I don't feel so good," I stammered, clutching my head. "Perhaps you need some fresh air," he suggested, guiding me out of the restaurant and into the forest. The air was cold and damp, and the trees seemed to close in around us. I stumbled, and he caught me, his grip surprisingly strong. "Let me show you something," he whispered, leading me deeper into the woods. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Panic welled up inside me. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just kept walking deeper and deeper into the darkness. Finally, we reached a clearing. In the center stood a large stone altar. My blood ran cold. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "A place of transformation," he said, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. "A place where souls are revealed." That's when I realized the truth. He wasn't looking for a soulmate. He was looking for a victim. He pulled a knife from his pocket, its blade glinting in the moonlight. I screamed and tried to run, but he grabbed me, throwing me onto the altar. I struggled, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. "Don't worry," he whispered, his voice dripping with menace. "This will all be over soon." Just as he raised a knife, a blinding light flashed through the trees. A group of people burst into the clearing, shouting and brandishing weapons. It was the police. Someone must have seen something suspicious and called them. The collector froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. He dropped the knife and tried to run, but the police quickly apprehended him. I lay on the altar, shaking and sobbing, as the police took me to safety. The investigation revealed that the collector was a serial killer who had been preying on women he met on dating apps for years. He would lure them to secluded locations, perform ritualistic sacrifices, and steal their souls, or so he believed. The music box was a tool he used to weaken his victims, making them more susceptible to his control. I was lucky to escape with my life. I still get chills thinking about that night. I deleted Soulmate Seeker immediately and haven't used a dating app since. The world is full of bad people, and while you are not always as lucky as me, always be safe. Always. I get chills thinking about Soulmate Seeker still. This story was so crazy. It was just a date, or so I thought. A seemingly normal date that twisted into something so profoundly unsettling. It's rewritten my understanding of human behavior. It started with a message on a hiking group forum. I joined a local group hoping to meet new people and explore the trails around here. This guide, Mark, messaged me about a hike he was planning up to Eagle Peak. His profile picture was just a generic landscape shot, but his messages were friendly, enthusiastic about hiking, and he seemed genuinely interested in my experience. I checked him out and saw he had been in the group for several months. Nothing seemed off. I was free that weekend, and the hike sounded beautiful, so I agreed. We met at the trailhead on a Saturday morning. He was taller than I expected, kind of lanky, with a nervous energy about him. He had this intense, unwavering eye contact that was slightly unnerving, but I chalked it up to him being introverted. We started up the trail, chatting about the local flora and fauna, favorite hikes, and just getting to know each other. The conversation flowed easily, and I actually started to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. The hike itself was challenging but rewarding. The scenery was stunning, the air was crisp, and for a while I genuinely enjoyed myself. We reached the summit, ate our lunches while taking the panoramic views, and then started our descent. That's when things started to shift. About halfway down, Mark started talking about his ex-girlfriend. Okay, not ideal first date conversation, but not a deal breaker either, except he didn't just mention her in passing. He went into excruciating detail about their relationship, how she'd betrayed him, and how he could never trust anyone again. His voice was tight, and his eyes had this glassy, distant look. He kept repeating that she had destroyed him. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, mentioning the scenery or asking about his other hobbies, but he would always circle back to his ex. It was like he was trapped in this loop of bitterness and resentment. I started feeling uncomfortable, but I figured he just needed to vent. Then he stopped walking. We were on a narrow section of the trail, with a steep drop-off on one side. He turned to me, his eyes locked on mine, and said, "You know, she looked a lot like you." A shiver ran down my spine. I forced a laugh and said, "Well, I guess there are only so many faces out there." I tried to keep moving, but he blocked my path. "No," he said, his voice low and menacing. "It's uncanny. The same hair, the same eyes, even the same smile." I felt the surge of panic. This wasn't just awkward, this was terrifying. I knew I had to get away from him. I took a step back, pretending to admire the view. "Wow, look at that tree," I said, pointing vaguely into the distance. "I think I saw a rare bird over there earlier. Maybe we should check it out." He didn't move. "Don't try to distract me," he said. "I'm not stupid." My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew I couldn't reason with him. I had to act fast. I took a deep breath and said, "Mark, I'm not your ex-girlfriend. I'm not responsible for what happened in your past. I think I'm going to head back down now. I'm not feeling well." I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "I need you to understand what she did to me." I yanked my arm away from him, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Get away from me." I yelled, my voice shaking. He lunged at me. I don't know what he intended to do, but I didn't stick around to find out. I screamed and shoved him as hard as I could. He stumbled backward, lost his footing, and went tumbling down the steep embankment. I stood there, frozen in shock, watching him fall. I didn't see him hit the bottom. I just heard the sickening sound of branches breaking and then silence. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run, to disappear, and pretend this never happened. But I knew I couldn't. I took out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. The rescue team arrived hours later. They found Mark at the bottom of the embankment, badly injured but alive. He was taken to the hospital and was questioned by the police. I told them everything about the hiking group, the messages, the hike, the ex-girlfriend, the threats, the shove. They seemed skeptical at first, but after investigating Mark's background and finding evidence of a restraining order from his ex, they started to believe me. Mark was charged with assault and battery. I had to testify at the trial. It was the most traumatizing experience of my life. Seeing him in the courtroom, his eyes filled with rage and resentment, made me realize how close I had come to becoming another victim in his twisted game. He was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I moved to a different state and tried to rebuild my life. But the memory of that hike still haunts me. I can still feel his grip on my arm, hear his menacing voice, and see the look in his eyes. I keep replaying this nightmare in my head, wondering what I could have done differently if I could have avoided it altogether. I still hike, but I'm much more cautious now. I always go with a group, and I make sure to thoroughly vet anyone I meet online before agreeing to a date. I learned a hard lesson that day on Eagle Peak. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who look and act like normal people, and they don't always carry a weapon other than their words.